Hey, how is everyone? Harrison here. Welcome to the Arabian Pleb show. I'm just going to get stuck into it, as I often do. I've got a clip here of an interview Dave Smith did with Nick Fuentes. And it's a 3-hour conversation, but just at the very end, I think it's like the last 10 minutes or so, they get into something super interesting that I thought's worth checking out. So let's head over there and let's get into it.
Okay. Venezuela. I think we really disagreed on this one.
Yeah.
So I was curious about that because I was surprised. Now I don't know exactly what your take was. I was like kind of told by people that you were for the war in Venezuela, and I was kind of surprised by that. So what is your position on that?
I'm all for it. I believe in the Monroe Doctrine. I believe in hemispheric defense, and I think it's legitimate. I think it was a low cost, low casualty, brief intervention that in the end is a huge strategic victory for a few reasons, which is we're going to be able to go in there, increase their oil output, and then take the oil. And then we also get Cuba to boot. John.
So Nick's a self-described Christian, and I just see this as just so antithetical to Christianity. We're going to increase their oil output and then take it. So you're advocating for theft. It's just like on its face, so absurd from the Christian perspective. So I just wanted to like make that point straight off the bat. So yeah, very anti-Christian from someone who's like, claiming to be a Catholic or whatever.
Ratcliffe was down there negotiating with them, and I think that's all legitimate. If you were fighting in Iran, that's on the other side of the world, and they've been preparing for this war for 30 years. They got 190 million people. Venezuela, Cuba, that's our backyard, and that's where all our shipping occurs. Mexico's our number one trading partner. That's the Gulf of America, and Russia and China are spying on us there. China's building all this dual-use infrastructure in Latin America.
I just got to say as well, sorry, like where my camera, where my little window is at the bottom left-hand corner that you can see right now, normally there's Dave Smith's part of the problem watermark there. So sorry, Dave, if you do see this, which I doubt you will, or if any of his fans see this, like I'm not just trying to like jack his video and completely like purposefully hide the fact that this is content from his show and his platform, and then I've just slapped my watermark on it on the right hand side. It's just I'm sorry, dude. Like, hang on, let me see if I can just quickly show. Can I move it? No, I can't. Okay, sorry. I've already started the recording. So, but anyway, I promise you, Dave's watermark is behind where my camera is. Okay. All right. All righty.
The Caribbean. Russia has military partnerships with these countries. So I think that's one of the few instances where you can say that's legitimate use of American power.
But what is the connection to the Monroe Doctrine exactly? Because I see a lot of people invoking, Donald Trump kept invoking it, but I don't really see how it's even consistent with the Monroe Doctrine. I mean, number one, there were two parts to the Monroe Doctrine. Everyone seems to forget the second. And the second part was that then we won't interfere over there. So we're certainly not following that part.
Right.
But the Monroe Doctrine essentially said that there can't be any more European colonies here, that you can't colonize any more of our hemisphere. There were already European colonies at the time, but they were like no more. But that's a lot different than just maybe they do some business with some people we don't like, or maybe there's some, like loose, I don't know, connection to a foreign power. That doesn't seem like the Monroe Doctrine said we can invade any country, whatever. We can go to war with any country we want because it's in our backyard. So I don't think that's exactly right. Also, but it's not like the Monroe Doctrine is law. It's something a president said a long time ago. But I don't know. I don't think it's consistent. I would also add, if you're going to say Venezuela was low cost, I think you got to add the Iran war into that cost on some level.
No way.
I think there's no question that the Venezuela strike being such a success is a big part of why Donald Trump was primed to be convinced that he could have another big success in Iran. And I think coming off that big success, it did seem to really encourage Hey, I'm not trying to remove blame from anyone
Sure.
else, but it did seem to encourage him that, like, yeah, you can do this. You can be great. You can be tremendous and awesome with the military. I don't know. I guess when we said earlier, when we were talking about the war in Iran, and I said, like, look, part of it's a moral issue for me. Just like, you can't go murdering people like this. How is it? And I don't like to be the guy. I'm not a Christian. I don't like when non-Christians, like, try to lecture Christians about Christianity or something. So I'm not, like, lecturing. But I guess I don't see, like, how is it consistent with Christianity to almost, like, if you have a view, let's say, look, some people died in the war in Venezuela. Well, or Cuban bodyguards or something. I don't know. Not that many people died, but some people died. And if it is, like, let's say something's in our hemisphere, it's good for us. We could go kill them and take their shit, and then we'll have their shit. You get my, like, how is that consistent with Christianity?
Yeah. Well, can we get into the Monroe Doctrine stuff as well?
Sure. Whatever you want. Yeah.
So, as far as the Monroe Doctrine is concerned, if you look at it, it has evolved over time. And it seems that it is...
I think we need to, like, because I'm not super familiar with it, we need to look at the Monroe Doctrine. I just need to clarify a couple of things. So I guess this is the Monroe Doctrine, 1823. So it's a letter. What does it say? Sorry, one second. So I guess, like, over here on the right is, like, the original, primary source, the original letter. And I'm just going to make this a bit bigger so I can see and read because I'm old. Okay. The Monroe Doctrine was articulated in President James Monroe's 7th annual message to Congress on the December the 2nd, 1823. The European powers, according to Monroe, were obligated to respect the Western Hemisphere as the United States' sphere of interest. President James Monroe 1823 annual message to Congress contained the Monroe Doctrine, which warned European powers not to interfere in the affairs of the Western Hemisphere. Understandably, the United States has always taken a particular interest in its closest neighbours, the nations of the Western Hemisphere. Equally, understandably, expressions of this concern have not always been favorably regarded by other American nations. The Monroe Doctrine is the best known U.S. policy towards the Western Hemisphere. I'm just going to make this a little bigger. I think I need to get glasses, man. Where was I up to? The Monroe Doctrine, hemisphere, buried in a routine annual message delivered to Congress by President James Monroe in December 1823, the doctrine warns European nations that the United States will not tolerate further colonization or puppet monarchs. The doctrine was conceived to meet major concerns of the moment, but it soon became a watchword of the U.S. policy in the Western Hemisphere. The Monroe Doctrine was invoked in 1865, where the U.S. government exerted diplomatic and military pressure in support of the Mexican President Benito. I'm not going to even try and pronounce his last name. This support enabled Juarez to lead a successful revolt against the Empire Maximilian, who had been placed on the throne by the French government. Almost 40 years later, in 1904, European creditors of a number of Latin American countries threatened armed intervention to collect debts. President Theodore Roosevelt promptly proclaimed the right of the United States to exercise an international police power to curb such chronic wrongdoing in his so-called Roosevelt corollary, or extension to the Monroe Doctrine. While the Monroe Doctrine's message was designed to keep European powers out of the Western Hemisphere, Roosevelt would strengthen its meaning to justify sending the United States into other countries of the Western Hemisphere. As a result, U.S. Marines were sent into Santo Domingo in 1904, Nicaragua in 1911, Haiti in 1915, ostensibly to keep the Europeans out. Other Latin American nations viewed these interventions with misgivings, and relations between the great colossus of the north and its southern neighbours remained strained for many years. In 1962, the Monroe Doctrine was invoked symbolically when the Soviet Union began to build missile launching sites in Cuba. With the support of the Organization of American States, President John F. Kennedy threw a naval and air quarantine around the island. After several tense days, the Soviet Union agreed to withdraw the missiles and dismantle the sites. Subsequently, the United States dismantled several of its obsolete air and missile bases in Turkey. All right. Anyway, let's go back to Dave and Nick. Oh, that's not it.
Evolved as America's become more powerful. When it was promulgated originally, we really had no navy and so no ability to enforce it. And there was a corollary added to it in the late 19th century when we became the preeminent superpower in the Western Hemisphere that basically said, we are the sovereign of the Western Hemisphere. Our edict is the law. Like whatever we say goes. So it is consistent with that. What's more, Venezuela and Cuba are effectively influence from Russia and China in the same way that a colony from France or Britain would be in the 19th century, because they produce missiles, they have spying posts like intelligence operation, they've got dual-use infrastructure, and so it does actually represent Chinese and Russian influence in our sphere of influence. So I would just say that. As far as the Christian angle is concerned, I don't think it's very clean, because in the era of strategic weapons and intelligence and all the modern technology, it gets a bit convoluted what constitutes national defense, because there's really is convoluted layers, as you know, of strategic thinking about nuclear weapons and how they're delivered, and then cyber weapons and intelligence agencies. So you could say, like, reasonably speaking, if Cuba has some kind of Russian-Chinese spying post on it in preparation for some future global war, it is theoretically in self-defense to try your best to neutralize that. Now, that doesn't give you carte blanche to go in and like, well, let's just kill everyone in Cuba, because we could do it. But I think within reason, you're able to conduct these kinds of extraordinary operations that are outside of what would be considered like a just war in the Middle Ages. Like, we're going to war with this kingdom because whatever. And in the case of Venezuela, it was so limited. So it's really, I wouldn't even call it a war, even a military operation. We just extradited one person who happened to be running a country that is a criminal enterprise. You know, Venezuela is a socialist dictatorship, and arguably they are like a criminal regime. Socialism's against the Catholic Church.
But what makes a criminal? You know, from my perspective,
runs on like human trafficking.
They're all criminal regimes. But yeah, I mean, it's a different. Some are worse than others. But like, what makes them a criminal regime?
Like, they make money off of kidnapping is huge there. Yeah. Like, people get kidnapped all the time, and they pay to release the hostages.
No, but I mean, you mentioned dictatorship, but you don't believe in democracy. So like that, dictatorship to me wouldn't seem like that would be a bridge too far for Nick Fuentes.
But there's good dictatorships and bad dictatorships.
Okay.
Point being is, like, if you want to use the moral angle, it's not like this was some kind of like decent humanitarian regime. Like, this was
I agree. Listen,
corrupt regime.
I'm the libertarian, so you've got me convinced. I am no fan of like the Maduro regime or the Chavez regime or anything like that. I guess like the updated just war theory that you just laid out just seems to me to be vague enough for the Israel lobby to drive 10 wars through. You know, like there's they're in connection with another country. They could, I mean.
Totally agree. Like this, what Nick's laying out there, his justification, like, yeah, Israel could use that justification, like Dave's saying, to justify the 7 countries that they're at war with right now and bombing the crap out of. One thing that I do want to look at, and I'm just, just sort of thinking about this stuff on the fly, so not totally fleshed out ideas, but I just want to have a quick look at the just war theory of Christianity, because I would be I mean, I've read the Gospels. My favorite Gospel is Matthew, particularly because it's the only Gospel that has the full Sermon on the Mount in it. But yeah, I'd be curious, like a bit, like let's have a look at like the just war theory of Christianity, because I don't remember at any point in any of the Gospels where Jesus is trying to justify war. Certainly not in a physical sense. He explicitly says, "Love your enemies." So let's have a look, because I feel like that this is going to be like some other apostles, probably Paul would be my guess, who's coming up with this stuff, and it seems to me pretty antithetical to the teachings of Jesus from Nazareth. So let me just have a quick look. So just an AI overview from Google. And I've asked, what is the just war theory in Christianity? Christian just war theory is a moral framework that seeks to reconcile the inherent wrongness of taking human life with the necessity of defending the innocent and maintaining justice. Originating with theologians like St. Augustine, forgive me if I'm pronouncing it wrong, and St. Thomas Aquinas, the doctrine strictly regulates when a war can be fought and how it should be conducted. Justice of going to war. These conditions dictate the moral and legal justification a state must meet before declaring war. Just cause. Force must be used to correct a grave, lasting, and certain evil, typically in the form of self-defense or protecting the innocent. Legitimate authority. War must be declared by a properly constituted, recognized government or state authority rather than private individuals. I'm already like finding myself disagreeing with all of this. No, I don't think Jesus doesn't talk about any of this, so I don't know where they're pulling this from. Right intention. The primary goal of the conflict must be to restore peace and correct the injustice, not to pursue territorial expansion or revenge. Last resort, all peaceful alternatives such as diplomacy, sanctions, and negotiations must have been exhausted or proven completely ineffective. Probability of success, there must be a reasonable expectation that the military action will achieve its goals without causing disproportionate collateral damage. And proportionality, the overall destruction expected from the war must not outweigh the evil being addressed. So, yeah, like none of this is what Jesus said. So I just fundamentally disagree with this, and to even try to couch this as Christian is ridiculous. Like, just absurd.
The nuclear issue is not an issue with Venezuela or Cuba. Mm-hmm. I mean, to me,
I mean, and I've got to say too, like, this is really funny, but this conversation that's happening right now, Dave Smith is actually more Christian than Nick Fuentes. Dave Smith's position is in more alignment with Jesus Christ than Nick Fuentes' position. Just saying.
I think Donald Trump has celebrated how wonderful this is, claimed it was a regime change, claimed we're in control of the oil now. Now, of course, for other factors, but Americans have only seen an increase in oil costs since then. What seems to me to have been accomplished by the war is a pretty brutal energy blockade of Cuba. I mean, this is a little island that's been destroyed by communism for many, many decades. They pose absolutely no threat to the United States of America, any reasonable way. The Soviets aren't bringing nuclear missiles to Cuba. They're trying to get a ship full
It's
of
a Russian
oil.
submarine off the coast.
Well, they were trying to move oil in, which Donald Trump allowed them to do, which I think was a good move, not worth starting a war with Russia over. But I think that, like, again, these are your people who came up with the just war theory, right? Like, these were all Catholics.
Yeah.
I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was all Catholics who came up with this. But the idea of at least having some, like, I understand the, like when
So that right there raises some eyebrows for me, definitely my too, that they're all Catholics, Thomas Aquinas and whoever that other guy was, and then their fellow travelers, Catholics. So Catholics are pushing this just war theory of Christianity. What a joke. What an absolute joke. Like, I mean, I'm going to have to, maybe I should like, you know what? Fuck it. Here we go. Here's a Bible. Let's flick to Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5. Let's have a look here. So, I mean, I won't read it all, but let's just like go through, like some of it. So there's the Beatitudes. So, I mean, here, look, let me just read some of this and let me get a little bit of light. Okay. The Sermon on the Mount. On the day as he saw the crowds gathering, Jesus went up on the mountainside and sat down. His disciples gathered around him, and he began to teach them. So there's a great multitude. I loved, actually, I can't remember who it was, but I heard it was Top Lobster. Shout out to Top Lobster. He had, I don't know who the gentleman was, but some scholar on his podcast, and he called the series a Sermon on the Mount. They're going through what we're about to read right now, but he made this distinction. I mean, like he pointed this out, and I thought, oh, that was like, you know, it kind of went over my head. But he talks about how like the multitudes. So on this day, he saw the crowds gathered. Jesus went up to the mountains and sat down. His disciples gathered around him, and he began to teach them. So, like, when I first read that, it sounded like, oh, like there's the multitudes, the thousands of people all gathering, and then Jesus is like teaching all these people. He's teaching the multitudes, but no, he's not. It's like he sees that the crowds are gathering, but then he sits his disciples down. So he's like having a private conversation with his disciples. His disciples gathered around him, and he began to teach them. So he's not like teaching the masses. He's teaching his disciples. And I think like the way that this gentleman sort of put it was like, these lessons, not everyone's going to be able to learn these lessons. These lessons are for those that have eyes to see and ears to hear. So I just thought that was like, you know, like very interesting and like powerful. It's like really good to understand that not everyone's going to understand this. Okay, so the Beatitudes. So these are Jesus's words now. God blesses those who are poor and realize their need for him, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs. And let me just get a bit more light. For they will be comforted. God bless those who are humble, for they will inherit the whole earth. God bless those who hunger and thirst for justice, for they will be satisfied. And I think Dave Smith's in that, certainly. God bless those who are merciful, for they will be shown mercy. God bless those whose hearts are pure, for they will see God. God bless those who work for peace, for they will be called the children of God. God bless those who are persecuted for doing right, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs. God bless you when people mock you and persecute you and lie about you and say all sorts of evil things against you because you are my followers. Be happy about it. Be very glad, for a great reward awaits you in heaven. And remember, the ancient prophets were persecuted in the same way. And And just so this is like a new translation Bible as well. So just give me 1 sec. Let me just go grab another Bible because it's worded like slightly different, and also the text is a lot bigger, and I'll be able to actually read it a little bit better. Just give me 1 second. All right. I got my bigger Bible. Okay, so let me just to like explain how, or just to show how the wording's like slightly different, but it more or less is saying the same thing. So he says here, oh man, this light's terrible. Just pull that mic down a little bit. Okay, that's a little better. All right. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Does any of that sound like a just theory of going to war? like it's just so ridiculous. Okay. Blessed are you when they rival and persecute you and say all kinds of evil against you falsely for my sake. Rejoice and be exceedingly glad, for great is your reward in heaven, for so they persecute the prophets who were before you. So now, right? So he starts off the sermon like that, and then now he actually gets into like the law. Like he's fulfilling Moses's law, and he's like explaining. He's like giving it more depth, basically, more depth to Moses's law and the 10 Commandments, right? Believers are salt and light. And actually what I want to do is, I know it's, I'm going to go back to this Bible, the new translation, just because it's a little easier to read in terms of its wording. It's a little harder to read in terms of the size of the text, unfortunately, but I feel like I'll do a better job. Okay, so teaching about salt and light. You are the salt of the earth, but what good is salt if it has lost its flavor? You can make it salty again. Can you make it salty again? It will be thrown out and trampled underfoot as worthless. You are the light of the world, like a city on a hilltop that cannot be hidden. No one lights a lamp and then puts it under a basket. Instead, a lamp is placed on a stand where it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your good deeds shine out for all to see, so that everyone will praise your heavenly Father. And then, okay, so teaching about the law. Maybe I won't like read everything because I'll be here for half an hour going through it all. But I really encourage like everyone, like go, like read the Sermon on the Mount, read the Gospels, but particularly read Matthew 5 through to Matthew 7, I guess. Yeah, Matthew 5 to 7 is the Sermon on the Mount. But I'll just I'll read some of it, but I'll just go through. So he's like, teaching about salt and light, that's what I just read then, teaching about the law, teaching about anger, teaching about adultery, teaching about divorce, teaching about vows, teaching about revenge, teaching about love for enemies, teaching about giving to the needy, teaching about prayer and fasting, teaching about money and possessions, teaching about not judging others, teaching about effective prayer, teaching about the golden rule, teaching about the narrow gate, teaching about the tree and its fruits, teaching about true disciples, teaching about building on a solid foundation. So that's the Sermon on the Mount. And let me just read, I'm going to read I'll read teaching about revenge and teaching about love for enemies, because that's probably most relevant to to this discussion. Okay. Stupid microphone. Okay. Teaching. Okay. What did I say? Teaching about revenge. Okay. You have heard the law that says the punishment must match the injury, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say, do not resist an evil person. If someone slaps you on your right cheek, offer the other cheek also. If you are sued in court and your shirt is taken from you, give your coat too. If a soldier demands that you carry his gear for a mile, carry it for 2 miles. Give to those who ask and don't turn away from those who want to borrow. And then let's read teaching about love for enemies. You have heard the law that says love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you. In that way, you will be acting as true children of your Father in heaven, for he gives his sunlight to both the evil and the good, and he sends rain on the just and the unjust alike. If you love only those who love you, what reward is there for that? Except even corrupt tax collectors do that much. If you are kind only to your friends, how are you different from anyone else? Even pagans do that. But you are to be perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect. Don't see there anywhere about going to war with people and trying to justify it. Just putting that out there. I don't see anywhere where Jesus is talking about trying to justify war. Anywhere. All right. That's enough of my terrible reading.
Thomas Aquinas and those guys, when they're coming up with just war theory, they're clear, and they were very well aware of this, that they're balancing different things, right? Like you're.
Oh yeah, and I'll back it up one second. But what got me on that tangent was like why I think it's so interesting that these are all Catholics that are coming up with this is because I don't think, in my opinion, I mean I'm still like forming it, but I'm sort of starting to lean this way that like anyone who's like promoting a just war theory of Christianity or, you know, like certain sects of Christianity, like I don't think that they're followers of Jesus. I think they're more followers of Paul the Apostle. That's becoming the position that I'm coming to. That's becoming like my understanding is that some of these people that claim to be Christians need to drop that name and call themselves Paulians, because in my opinion that's what they are. They're invoking things that Paul said and trying to say that it's Christianity when Jesus never said half the stuff that they're claiming.
Balancing Christian ethics and then war, which is a very difficult thing to, right? There's like the worldly realities of these wars, and they're attempting to go, look, obviously Christians can't accept killing someone and taking shit from them. So like, here is the only way that it could be justified is if it's a defensive war, you're attacked, you fight it proportionally, something like that. I just think saying that like this regime ran off of like, you know, criminal activities, I mean, it's certainly true, but I don't know, it just seems like a justification to start a war anywhere at any.
Yeah, that's right, because like most governments are criminal. Like government by its definition is like, you know, is criminal. Like it's funded through force and extortion, extracting money involuntarily, like by force. You know, like, just that in and of itself is so immoral. It's like so against, you know, like, I don't know, the idea of not aggressing against someone, not stealing their stuff. Like, it's just like, that is what it is. Taxation is theft. I know that's cliche to a lot of people, especially libertarians and libertarian-leaning people, but it's just true. It's like it's involuntary. It's taking something through force at the threat of violence. So just that, the very mechanism that governments use to finance any program, anything that they do is starting with stealing. So yeah, governments are evil. Yeah, that's a given to like any libertarian, anyone who's being honest about like what this institution is. It's predicated on theft. And then like that's the very nuts and bolts of government. Like forget about like wars and regulation and all the other things that comes with government and what they do. Like the only way that it can fund what it does is by stealing from the rest of us. And you know, if it's not doing that, if it's like getting its funding through voluntary means, then like it no longer becomes a government then. So yeah, like governments are evil for sure. Like that's not a justification to like go to war. Yeah, of course it gets convoluted because, dude, like Dave's got you here in a bind. Like this is like really brilliant, but like Dave is like using Christianity as a way to like as a basis for morality and asking Nick like to his face like, what do you think about this? This seems like in contradiction to the whole ethos of like Jesus's teachings, and Nick's having to justify it and come up with like just these weak arguments and saying like, oh well, it's really complicated and whatever. It's like, no, dude, it's actually not that complicated, really. Like it's really not. Like, and if you're a Christian and you're supposedly a follower of of Jesus's teachings, then you can't support this. But here he is. He's like getting twisted into pretzels trying to come up with a justification. It's actually like sad and evil and concerning.
It just seems like a justification to start a war anywhere at any time. And I do worry about that because that's, you know, those justifications are almost always used in very bad ways.
I would just say that, you know, again, it just gets to be a bit convoluted because the nature of warfare has changed because of strategic weapons, you know, like when I say nuclear weapons, I mean, Russia and China are nuclear armed, and that means that we're kind of engaged with them in every way at all times. As long as those weapons exist, we're always going to be spying on them. We're always going to be in some like virtual state of conflict with them. And that is global because, you know, the whole basis of the Monroe Doctrine is nobody can touch us because of the oceans. Well, what our adversary is going to do, they're going to try to get on our side. Cuba, Venezuela, Nicaragua, Bolivia, whatever, or, you know, even building the dual use stuff in every other country, Argentina, Peru, Jamaica, Haiti, whatever. So I would classify that under something like self-defense. And with proportionality, like I said, we're not saying like, and by we, I mean me, I guess. I'm not saying like we can go to war with Venezuela and like invade their country and take their sovereignty, take all their supplies. I'm saying, though, that if they're aligned against us.
Yeah, but a second ago you were saying we can take their oil. We're going to get them to produce more and then we'll take it. He's just getting caught in speaking out of both sides of his mouth.
In our hemisphere in a way that's threatening.
Because you can't justify it. Under Christian ethics, under Jesus' teachings, none of this is justified. It's blowing my mind, actually. The more I'm starting to realize that most Christians either haven't read the Bible, like haven't read the Gospels, particularly Matthew and the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5 through 7, where Jesus is actually laying down the law. He's laying down, he's fulfilling the law, and he's like giving it more depth. The law is in the Ten Commandments and Moses' law. So either Christians are like oblivious of this, like have no idea, or they do, and it's like more cynical than that, and they're trying to like put words in Jesus's mouth or just totally disregard the words Jesus spoke.
We should be able to go in and change that. If they want it to be better, they should just align with us. You know, you say, well, Cuba's this tiny defenseless island. Okay, well, then you better submit to Washington because you're right next to the superpower, and they're playing games.
Saying you better submit to Washington is how we've got the whole situation in Cuba for 60 years, you know? I mean, that was what they said initially. You better submit to Washington.
And if they want to avoid that, if they want to avoid a war, then they could always choose a diplomatic option.
So could Iran. So could all of Israel's enemies, though, you know?
But Israel can... I would say that's a different story. Because,
okay, but that is true about both of them, you know? I mean, I don't know. I guess I just think that, I think, you know...
Dude, Dave's got him. Dave's got him in a major way here. Like, this is so revealing of Nick and how inconsistent he is and how none of this aligns with Christianity whatsoever. And when I say Christianity, I mean, like, literally what Jesus said. Literally... the words Jesus spoke, his teachings, this is just totally in contradiction with that. This is like Jesus would call Nick a hypocrite, just like he called the Pharisees a bunch of hypocrites. This is so hypocritical. It's ridiculous. Dave's right. Dave is in this argument right now, in this discussion, Dave is actually preaching peace, and Dave is actually preaching Jesus's teachings, ironically. Unironically, probably, like, because he's smart. He's a smart dude, man. Like, Nick's wrong on this. This is not at all what Jesus taught.
Essentially, my take on all this shit is that, and I think this is right. I know this is kind of like a boring, you know, there's just not the energy to some of my views that there are to yours, because this is just, but I think that the bottom line here kind of is, we can't afford the government we have, or even close to it. Like, you just can't afford this. We're living under the biggest government in the history of the world. I mean, by orders of magnitude. Like, right. It really is. You just look at how much money Washington spends every year. And, you know, we can't afford the entitlement programs, let alone the world empire. And so we're $40 trillion in debt. And that's not even representing it. Because even our entire tax base plus the $40 trillion in debt couldn't pay for this size of government. And so we just have to print the money to make up the difference. And we've printed, I know you might even know some of these numbers better than me, but what is it? Since George W. Bush, I think we've created like 80% of the money that's ever been created. We're just printing trillions and trillions of dollars. This is how we've essentially band-aided over this bullet wound of an economy. And because of this is what's destroying essentially the currency. It's what's making life unaffordable for young people and working class people. And if you're going to continue to debase your currency, you're going to continue to see the life like this, where, you know, it really does destroy any hope at having a conservative country. I don't mean just conservative like in decent values. If young people can't afford to start families. And all this stuff about like kind of looking for another war and another war when they're, even as you describe it, this isn't a war of necessity that you're describing. You're describing a war of choice. Like, maybe things would be better if we fought this. I just think it's really bad policy to allow our government to always be in search, as John Quincy Adams would say, of another monster to destroy. You know, these people do not, and I think this is one of the fundamental problems with government in general, and it's one of the problems with the Trump administration and all of this, is that these people, as you said at the beginning, they are not on our team. They're not working based on our incentives. They're working based on their incentives. And if you give them that type of power, I mean, to just kind of say, anywhere anyone's interfering that maybe could be strategically bad for us, we can go fight a war there. I mean, man, the military-industrial complex is going to be like, okay, we got some thoughts.
I'm saying that from a moral point of view. From a moral point of view, as long as, because I think the case could be made, like, for example...
I thought he wasn't speaking about morality before. I thought it was all, you know, like, strategic. Like, what? Yeah, okay, Nick. So from a moral point of view, from Jesus' point of view, it'd be cool to go and just invade Venezuela. or not invade, but like have a military operation where they extract the leader and kill some people. Jesus would be cool with that. It's just absurd. It's so absurd, man. Like, don't call yourself a Christian then. How about that?
In the Cuban Missile Crisis, I mean, would you say something like, well, Cuba's a sovereign state. They're allied with Russia, so they're putting nuclear missiles to defend themselves. You would say, no, that threatened us. It's too close. And the same goes even, for other conflicts that have happened in the world. I think morally speaking, it just gets a bit more complex because of the nature of how things are. And I would take it a step further.
Man, I'm sick of, I don't mean to keep harping on this, but like, read what Jesus said. It's not that complex. I mean, like, it's difficult. Yeah, it's difficult to love your enemy. It certainly is. Like, that's a pretty like crazy concept, but it's not complex. It's hard to do, but it's not complex.
And say, when it comes to, this being a war of choice, if you actually look at the strategic situation, we've been losing the Western Hemisphere for 15 years. China's become the number one trading partner of basically all of Central and South America and the Caribbean. Yeah. And what this does is it allows them then to go in and build all this infrastructure. And that's part of a very concerted play. Like, they are trying to increase their influence. They're building this stuff, and they're building this stuff in anticipation that they're going to put their Navy there. They have 400 times the shipbuilding capacity as us. They're building deep water ports everywhere, eventually to put their ships. And like, for example, there's a new technology. They put a missile launch system in a container, like a shipping container. So they could get their biggest container ships, load them up with shipping containers that may or may not contain all missiles, or like in Operation Spiderweb last year in Ukraine, they could contain all these drones. Right. So if there's a future conflict, let's say in Taiwan, do you want Venezuela and Cuba to have Chinese spying posts? And do you want a Chinese deep water port in Peru? And they've got all their shipping there, and it's simultaneously surveilling us, but also loaded up with weapons. That obviously puts us in a big disadvantage. So, it's like that other expression, if you want peace, prepare for war. Yeah. So how do we check China? I don't think it's a war of choice. I think this is, we're kind of getting our act together because we let it go in the Western Hemisphere.
Well, Taiwan's going to have to submit, I think.
To China?
Well, by the way, no, I say it kind of tongue-in-cheek, but I actually agree with you on that one. I think that, so you brought up the Cuban Missile Crisis. It's a good example. And I would certainly agree with you that, no, that is something that is totally reasonable to go like, no, we can't. I understand you haven't bombed us yet, but I can't be expected to sit here with a knife at my throat and go on with life as normal. This is intolerable. But of course, the solution to that, as you well know, was for Jack Kennedy to get on the phone. And that was not solved by invading Cuba. In fact, when he invaded Cuba, it was an unmitigated disaster. But this was solved by getting on the phone and making a deal and saying, listen, we can't live with this. So you got to move these back. And in exchange for that, we will pull what was it, from Turkey, I think we moved our nukes back. Just seems to me like with all these problems, that would be a way better way to solve them. And of course, the U.S. does have tremendous leverage if it were willing or able to use it. Now, this is one of the interesting dynamics with our government, is that it's this giant organization, but it's not exactly like the guy at the top just runs the whole organization. There's many factions within it. And if the guy at the top is going with the wind, he's very powerful. But if he's going against the wind, like, in other words, if the president of the United States of America is the most powerful position in the world, in some respects, if Donald Trump wants to start a war, he can start a war anywhere he wants to. There's really no more congressional, authorization or even war powers or anything. And honestly, like, does anyone believe, even if they did, if this War Powers Act had passed and Donald Trump just went, suck my dick, does anyone think like that anything would have changed? So if he's starting wars, he's very powerful. Now, if he wanted to destroy the military-industrial complex, he basically has as much power as me or you. So like if you're going with the grain, you're very powerful, but going against it, you're not. But like, for example, if you wanted to end, say, like the war in Ukraine, a little bit tougher now. At the beginning, maybe would, but we have enormous cards we could play. We could say, hey, look, we'll leave NATO. The U.S. will leave NATO. It'll be just a European alliance. You can come in and we'll leave, but you all work out. Like, you could get Putin to stop, but you'd have to give him something, And even as you say this, I don't disagree with like some of the potential issues that you're talking about, and it is a very new world. And look, even as we're watching in Iran, I've been at this for 20 years now, and drones in war were just not a thing. That just wasn't a thing. It was a brand new thing when we had them. Now, all of a sudden, this is a new reality. It totally changes warfare now when they can essentially close the Strait of Hormuz, if need be, just with cheap drones. But again, China's been doing over the last 20 years, while we've been fighting endless wars and spending trillions of dollars, they've been doing business with everybody. And perhaps then maybe that would be, if we want to get into that strategic fight, that it would be to, let's do diplomacy. There's a lot of shit that the rest of the world really hates that we do. China, when Donald Trump even just went over there now, right? He wants them to stop helping Iran in whatever logistical intelligence way they've been. And they want a whole lot of things from him. We can get things, you know what I'm saying? It's just even things like big military mobilizations in Asia or something like that. They have a real problem with that. And so us arming Taiwan or stuff. So I guess my point is just that we could, rather than launching wars over this stuff, and look, the Venezuela one didn't turn into a catastrophe, but you risk that every time you launch one of these wars. And I think we would be much better off at just being smart, being much more restrained. Saying, what was the phrase you used? In order to end a war, you gotta, or whatever. It's a peace through strength, essentially. I mean, I've been hearing peace through strength out of the Republicans since Ronald Reagan. I was too young to remember Ronald Reagan, but I know he said it. They've been saying it my entire lifetime. And all we've gotten for it is permanent militarism, forever wars, crushing debt. And so, don't get me wrong, I guess maybe where we could agree, and then we could leave it at agreeing to disagree, is that I'd prefer we be more involved in our backyard and not around the rest of the world. I'd prefer it be in our national interest rather than in some other country's interest. Or, by the way, I don't even really think any of this shit is in Israel's interest. I think this is in what the Likudniks perceive as the interest of greater Israel. I think they've gotten Israelis killed and probably made them more of a hated pariah state than ever before. But I also think in the same sense, it doesn't really seem to be the way DC works. They're not really working in the interest of the American people.
I agree. I mean, I think diplomacy is preferable where possible, but sometimes it's not possible. And it sounds like a lot of this root causes. It's when you go to these Democrats, they say, well, the reason these kids are committing crime is because they don't have after-school programs. And it's dude, they need to go to jail. Cops need to beat the shit out of them and take them to jail. And with Venezuela, it's look, Rick Grenell proffered a deal with them. They didn't take it. I mean, because they wanted Maduro to stay in power. And our sticking point was, you got to realign with us, and Maduro's got to go. And they wouldn't agree to it. So we had to go in and take care of them. And I agree with you, though. I'm a restrainer. I believe in restraint. I think that we should be very selective in our engagements, keep them in our backyard, prefer diplomacy, but sometimes you got to kill people. Sometimes you got to do it.
I wouldn't necessarily disagree with that, but also I think there's a lot going on that we don't know about there, and I think Maduro was all tied.
Sometimes you got to kill people
with the CIA and a whole lot of stuff going on that we're not aware of. Okay, I'm glad you prefer diplomacy first, Nick Fuentes. I very much enjoy our.
That's it. Sometimes you got to kill people. Heard it first from Nick Fuentes. Sometimes you got to kill people. Very Christian of Nick there. Sometimes you got to kill people. That's pretty sure Jesus might have said that. Oh, no, wait, he didn't. No, he never said that, ever. I was going to pull up some other clips and, comment on them and go through a bunch of different other things and the markets and whatever I normally like to do, antiwar.com, but I've already been going for 55 minutes or thereabouts, 50 minutes, so I'll leave it at that. But, yeah, hopefully that was interesting for everyone out there. Yeah, I think Dave just it was a fascinating conversation, and it wasn't necessarily about being a debate and who's going to win, and but I got to say, I mean, Dave, he just has the more reasonable, more moral, more aligned with Jesus' position than anybody else, excuse me, including Nick Fuentes, a much more peace-loving, anti-war position which is more in alignment with Jesus from Nazareth, Jesus Christ. So I'll leave it at that. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Forgive your trespasses, love your enemies. God bless you all. If you like what you see, like, share, all that good stuff. Follow me on X at ArabAncap, ARABANCAP, and we'll catch you next time. Peace out.